We want to use rebase, so let's install it. npm install re-base, it says. So we can use yarn add rebase or npm install --save rebase. Otherwise, it won't add it to package.json, and other people who pull down your code won't get rebase with it. Yarn add re-base. Have a look at our package.json. There it is, rebase 3.0.1. Let's look at releases here. That doesn't actually call it a release, but guess what? 3.0 is real dang new, and it changed a lot. In fact, it changed between the time that I wrote ThingList and the time that we're discussing it in class. It changed within the last week, which meant that there's never been a better time to be in the afternoon class, because this went really rough this morning because it changed the way that it works. But now we know how it works. So that was, I suppose, kind of fun for the morning to see the process of working through something infuriating. But we don't have to suffer. They suffered for your sins. So now that we have rebase, let's see what this says to do. Blah, blah, blah. Example, using only the Firebase database component. That's all we're really interested in right now. So once again, this is not ES6 syntax, but we can translate. So unsurprisingly, we need to require rebase. Looks like we need to require Firebase and a database module out of the Firebase package. I'm guessing Firebase is a dependency of rebase because we didn't install it separately, but it didn't tell us to. So I bet it's a dependency of rebase and we just have it. And then we call Firebase initialize app. Ooh, this looks familiar. You remember seeing something that looked like that over on Firebase when we clicked how to add it to your web app? All right, let's get started. I'm going to create a new file in the same directory as all my components, the source directory. I'm going to call it lowercase b base.js. It's not a component, so I'm not going to capitalize it. And I'm going to start doing some of this stuff, but with ES6 syntax. So import rebase from re-base. Let's also import Firebase from Firebase/app. Let's import database from Firebase/database. Now that we've done our importing, let's initialize our Firebase app. Const app equals Firebase dot initialize app. And let's pass in a big fat object. This one. So this is going to be different for everybody. This is going to be your API key, the URL of your database. So just copy all this stuff from API key to messaging sender ID. Paste it in here. Fix my indentation. Cool. All right, now that we have this app, we need to get the database. So const db equals database app. Why is database even defined? Because we imported it. And then we call rebase.create class. Now you may have noticed in all our React examples that aren't using ES6, they say react.create class. So that's the way you used to do it. So this is very similar, rebase.create class. We don't really need to save that in a variable. We just need to export it. So we could say export default rebase dot create class. Make sure we pass in that DB. And let's save this. Over in app.js, let's import it. So in our list of imports, let's say import base from /base. And let's just see how things are going over here. Has it exploded? It has not. It just warns us that base is defined but never used. We're getting to that. So far, so good. So it was sync state that we're particularly interested in, right? Allows you to set up two-way binding between your component state and your Firebase. Whenever your Firebase changes, your component state will change. Whenever your component state changes, Firebase will change. All right, the arguments. An endpoint and some options. Argument 1, endpoint. Type string, the relative Firebase endpoint to which you'd like to bind your component's state. Let's go look at Firebase and see if we can figure out what the heck that means. This overview is lovely, but it's time to get down to business. So look at the hamburger menu up here in the upper left. Okay, that's the overview. We've got authentication. Let's check out authentication. Authenticate and manage users from a variety of Authenticate and manage users from a variety of providers without server-side code. Learn more. That's cool, but not yet. Database. Store and sync data in real time across all connected clients. Learn more. We are. Now, once again, we're going to use our reading skills, pay attention to our surroundings, and see if there might be information that's important to us. I bet when they put something with a big star next to it, we should read it. Default security rules require users to be authenticated. So if we tried to use this without authentication, I don't think it would work. Where could we possibly go? Default security rules. Where would we go if we wanted to change rules? I'm an observant boy, and I'm aware of my surroundings. So I noticed that there's a Rules tab under a real-time database. Aha, there's that same warning. Default security rules require users to be authenticated. Actually, with a star in blue, it's not a warning. It's kind of saying, good job, bub. This looks like JSON. I like JSON. Rules, read, auth, not equal null. Write, auth, not equal null. In other words, you just have to be authenticated. But we're not adding authentication yet. That's too complicated. Our fragile little minds can't handle it yet, so let's just change that to read, true. Write, true. So now everybody can do both. Notice up here it says unpublished changes. We haven't saved this. So hit publish, and these will become the new rules. Now we get a big fat red warning. Your security rules are defined as public. Anyone can read or write to your database, but that's what we want. We love everyone equally. So let's change back to our data tab. You can dismiss that if you want, or you can leave it here to remind you that this is something that would be nice to change later. All right, ThingList afternoon, null. This is our database. There's nothing in it. So Rebase said this first thing is an endpoint, the relative endpoint to which you'd like to bind your component state. Let's add something here. Let's hit this plus. Give it a name of, fantasy movies. And we'll say that's a whole list of things. So hit the plus here. See, we're basically making a JSON type structure, but using this funny little interface. Because the real-time database is basically JSON. It's not a relational database. You don't use SQL. It's a NoSQL database like MongoDB or others that you may have used. Who's used a NoSQL database before? Yeah, Mongo. So kind of similar. So fantasy movies. What's a fantasy movie? No one's ever seen a fantasy movie. Lord of the Rings. Yeah, that's like a million fantasy movies, isn't it? So name. Let's give it a key of movie 190. Value. The Hobbit. Volume 9. Because we need to take a short children's book and turn it into a 10-hour movie. Because our name is Peter Jackson. Add. Hey, look. There it is. Why am I bothering to hard code this in here? To show you that fantasy movies is an endpoint. Fantasy movies dot movie 190 is an endpoint. So that's what it means when it says the relative Firebase endpoint to which you'd like to bind your component's state. So how about if we had an endpoint called things? Seems legit. So it just wants a string with the name of that endpoint. So when are we going to run this thing? We want to run this thing basically as soon as this component comes into existence. So looking back at our lifecycle methods, how about component will mount? It doesn't need to be in the DOM yet. It just needs to exist. So component will mount will run right away. Let's do that. So let's add that here. Component will mount. And as a general rule, put your lifecycle methods right under the constructor, or if you have no constructor, at the very top. It's not a rule. It's not going to break if you don't. But put things where people are going to look for them, and that's where people are going to look for them because that's where everyone puts them, so put them there. Thanks. Component will mount. So we imported base, so let's call base.syncState. Argument 1, the endpoint. We said things. There's no such endpoint there yet, but guess what? It doesn't matter. It'll just add it. Argument 2, to rebase sync state. Options. It's an object with some properties. Looks like 2 of them are required. Context and state. Context, the context of your component. So I guess I need another argument that's an object. I'm going to go ahead and line up all my arguments here. Context, the context of your component. It just means this. The app component itself. Basically, since this thing's job is to sync our state with an endpoint, it needs to know what it's the state of. It's the state of this, right? This.state. Next, state. The state property you want to sync with Firebase can be an arbitrarily nested property a la foo.bar. We only have one property in state, right? What's it called? Things. So the string things. Again, we don't put this.state.things here. We just tell it the string. We tell it the name of the property to sync. So we've told it the endpoint. We've told it the property on state. Let's try adding something. No way. No way it's this easy. It's not. You're full of crap. Stop lying to me. Let's put some JavaScript frameworks in here. Angular. Let's add another one. Ember. Let's go out and look at Firebase. Holy gosh darn cuss and cuss. Things. I got two of them. Angular and Ember. It just worked. We didn't even have an endpoint named things yet. Let's get rid of this fantasy movie nonsense. Okay, this is supposed to be two-way binding, right? So let's change Angular to AngularJS, the old version. Let's try like hitting enter. There we go. There, it changed. I'm going to flip back to ThingList now. It's AngularJS now. Holy smokes, it actually does the thing. Two-way binding. But guess what doesn't work? Delete. Gosh, cussing, dang it. So here's why. Other things could be updating Firebase as well, right? We could update it directly in Firebase. We could have two different apps talking to the same Firebase database. So if we send something, if we have something in our state, this things object with various things in it, if we send that things object back up to Firebase, and Firebase already has something there that isn't included here, it's not going to delete it. It's going to like sync it back down, right? So when we delete it, all that means is we're not including it in that sync. But that's not going to delete it. So we actually have to explicitly set that thing to null. In other words, it's important that the key for the deleted item actually stay in state long enough for it to sync with Firebase. That's how it knows to delete it. So I promised we would change this when we did it. Down in remove thing, instead of delete, or did I promise that? I promised the morning class. I hereby promise we're going to change this line. Okay, we're no longer going to use the delete key blip. We're no longer going to use the delete keyword. Instead, we're going to set things square bracket thing.id to null. Not undefined, but null. It isn't that it's never been defined, it's that it is now nothing. Had we done this from the beginning, it wouldn't have worked. Before we were syncing with Firebase, this would have done bad things. But now let's try it. Delete. It's gone. Yep, it's gone. No more AngularJS. This is 2017, man. We just have Angular. And yeah, we have React. Pretty wicked. Add Firebase, real-time database. Yeah, I'll say sync with Firebase, real-time database. There we go. I like that message.